The next talk is by Professor G. Srinivas Raghavan from IIITB. He has done his PhD from IIT Kanpur and has over 18 years of industry experience. His interest is in the area of algorithms and complexity theory. I invite Professor Srinivas Raghavan to deliver his talk.
Hi, good morning. So this talk is it's essentially about some connection with Ramanujan's work, though a little far-fetched, with computer science and IT. Because one question that Prasanna asked me was, has there been any application of Ramanujan's work in computer science at all? And so this was one place where I found that there has been a connection with Ramanujan's work, and it's the results that I'll talk about here, they actually fundamentally depend on some of Ramanujan's conjectures, which are later proved. It's now a theorem. So this is essentially about what are called expander graphs, and they have found a lot of applications in computer science of late. And the existence of a family of expander graphs seem to crucially depend on some of Ramanujan's work, and that's essentially what I'm going to be talking about. Why these are called Ramanujan graphs is something that I'll not come to till the pretty much the last slide of the talk. Please take it as Ramanujan graphs for now. Why was it named after Ramanujan is something we will I'll talk about only right at the end. Right. So essentially, it's going to be in three parts. I'll talk a little bit about what is known as spectral graph theory, the connections between the algebraic properties of the adjacency matrix of a graph and the combinatorial structural properties of the graph itself, and how that leads to what are called Ramanujan graphs today. And I'll also talk a little bit about expander graphs, and at the end we will connect the two and see what the relationship is. Okay. So just to motivate the whole thing, why? So essentially, we are talking about how well connected a graph is. So is it well connected? Not so well connected is, and simple example here. There are two graphs. Both are of degree 4. Every vertex is exactly 4 neighbors. Okay, and I'm sure most of you would agree that the one on the right side seems to be more connected, whatever that means, than this one. And if you explore that a little more, the reason seems to be that if you look at, for example, on this graph, if I have to go from node 1 to node 6, I need to follow at least 3 links. And the reason is, so if I start from 1, this has 4 neighbors, so the first step I can go only to either 10 or 9 or 2 or 3. Okay, and the second step, from 10 I can go to these, from 9 I can go to these 2, 2 I can go to 4, 3 I can go to 5. So there are so what this basically means is that to go from 1 to 6 I need to follow at least 3 links, whereas on this graph I can go from any node to any other node in exactly 2 steps, at most 2 steps. Okay, and that's the reason I'm calling this more connected than this. Though the number of edges in both the graphs are exactly the same, both are of degree 4, same number of vertices. Okay, and so why is this important? It's obviously useful in designing efficient communication networks, because what you would really like to optimize on. The resource which is really costing money is the link, right? So I would want to spend as little money building links as possible, yet be able to get from one node to another in as few hops as possible, right? So a good network will need to be well connected, right? It has seen a lot of applications in design of rapidly mixing stochastic processes. So rapidly mixing meaning it would converge to a stationary distribution very, very quickly. And the more connected a graph is, it is known that it is a random walk in such a graph will converge very quickly. Okay, it has been used in pseudo-random generators for error correcting codes, the kind that Murli talked about. Okay, now, so what makes a graph more or less connected? You can look at it two ways. One is, okay, so one way to precisely define connectedness is to talk about its diameter. So what do I mean by the diameter? Given any pair of vertices, what's the shortest path from one vertex to another? So that's the min here, and the longest of those shortest paths. Okay, so which pair of vertices has the longest shortest path between them, right? So that is the diameter of the graph. So a graph could be called well connected if the diameter is small, right? So to go from any vertex to any vertex, it wouldn't take me that many hops, right? And the other way to look at well connectedness is if I take some subset of the nodes of the graph, then there are enough paths which can potentially take me out of the subset, right? So if I so that's basically what this is. It says so given any subset of the vertices, right? So you count the number of edges which will take you from this subset to a node which is outside this subset, and that, just to normalize, what is that divided by the size of the subset that I have taken, and take the minimum of those. So which means which is the subset which is most isolated in some sense in the entire graph. And so if the most isolated subset in the graph is not all that isolated, meaning it still has enough paths which can take you out of the subset, that is another definition of connectedness, right? So there is, so basically what it means is that nowhere in no matter where I am in the graph, I will never get stuck. There will be enough ways for me to get out of that subset. Okay, and this is also known as the isoperimetric number of the graph. Okay, now so these two seem to be kind of two entirely different definitions coming from different perspectives, right? But there seems to be a unifying theme, and that's where spectral graph theory comes in. So yeah, basically people have found very deep connections between the algebraic properties of the adjacency matrix and the combinatorial properties of the underlying graph. Okay, so just some examples. If you take a d-regular n vertex undirected graph G1, the adjacency matrix is symmetric, all the rows and columns will add up to D, all these are pretty trivial. So the eigenvalues of M are real, and the largest eigenvalue will always be D, and the smallest eigenvalue will be greater than or equal to minus D. Okay, now so with that, now we can look at some very interesting results that are known. One, G is connected if and only if the second largest eigenvalue, sorry, I think this is a typo, lambda naught should be greater than lambda 1. Lambda naught is the largest eigenvalue, lambda 1 is the second largest eigenvalue. Okay, so if there is a gap between lambda naught and lambda 1, then G is connected, and this is if and only if. And it can also be generalized. In general, the multiplicity of lambda naught, which is the largest eigenvalue, okay, that is equal to the number of connected components of G. Okay. The maximum size of a clique is a complete subgraph, and that is known to be at most lambda 1 plus 1, lambda 1 being the second largest eigenvalue. G is bipartite if and only if lambda n minus 1 equal to minus d. And again, you can think of a bipartite graph as a graph which is two colorable, and so you can generalize it to the chromatic number of the graph, and that is, there is a lower bound of the chromatic number, which is 1 minus lambda naught by lambda n minus 1, the modulus of those two. Okay, the maximum size of a cut in G, a cut is if you chop off a set of edges of the graph becomes disconnected, right? So the maximum size of a cut in G is at most this much. And so there are a number of these connections which relate the spectral properties of the adjacency matrix to the structural properties of the graph. Okay. Now, so this is something that we will. So the two sort of characterizations that we looked at earlier on for the connectedness of a graph. One is the diameter, and we also talked about how many outgoing edges do you have from every any subset of the nodes of the graph, right? So now we will look at a spectral characterization of both of those properties that we said sort of relate to connectedness. So one is the diameter. So it is known that the diameter is bounded by this, and the significant takeaway from here is this, that I mean, since we are talking about connectedness of graphs, we are really interested in looking at how small the diameter can be, and it turns out from this that the smaller the diameter basically implies that the second largest eigenvalue must be as small as possible, right? And so let's look at the other thing, the expansion ratio Hg, which we saw as the other characterization. And so this is again a known result by Noga, Alon, and Millman. And this lambda is the spectral gap, which is lambda naught minus lambda 1, the difference between the largest and the second largest eigenvalues. Okay, and there is an upper and the lower bound for the expansion ratio. Okay, so this again implies that larger the expansion ratio, smaller the lambda 1. So essentially both of these, the trying to make the expansion ratio as large as possible or trying to make the diameter as small as possible, both seem to lead to the same thing in terms of the spectral characteristic, which is that I need to make the second largest eigenvalue as small as possible, which also means I need to maximize the spectral gap, which is you recall the lambda naught for a d regular graph, the largest eigenvalue is in fact d. Okay, so so minimizing lambda 1 is the same as saying I want to maximize my spectral gap, which the difference between the largest and the smallest eigenvalues. sorry, the largest and the second largest eigenvalues. Okay, so with this background, now we will talk about what Ramanujan graphs are. For a d-regular graph whose diameter is this, we actually have a lower bound on the second largest eigenvalue. So second largest eigenvalue cannot be smaller than this. Okay. Now, I mean, what we really wanted to do from the earlier discussion was that we wanted to bring the second largest eigenvalue down as much as possible, but here there is a lower bound which says it cannot be smaller than 2 root d minus 1. Okay, so the best that we can hope for really, and this is another result on similar lines. Okay, so the best that we can hope for is that lambda 1 is in fact equal to 2 root d minus 1. And those are precisely what are called Ramanujan graphs. D-regular graphs where lambda 1 is also less than or equal to, which essentially the same as saying lambda 1 is equal to 2 root d minus 1. These are what are called Ramanujan graphs. And the term Ramanujan graphs was coined by these three people. I'll tell you why later on. Okay, so okay, so basically Ramanujan graphs, now for a graph to be as well connected as possible, what we wanted to do was to reduce lambda 1 as much as possible, but we can't reduce beyond this, and this is the best that we can achieve. So in the other way of saying the same thing is that Ramanujan graphs are as connected as possible. You can't have graphs which are more connected than Ramanujan graphs, because this is the best that you can achieve as far as lambda 1 is concerned. Okay, and yeah, so Ramanujan graphs have the largest spectral gap possible. Okay, so some examples of Ramanujan graphs, these are the obvious examples, the complete graphs on but that's really not what we're interested in, because we don't want to have that many edges in the graph, right? So we want to have a well-connected graph with a low diameter, yet not waste that many edges. So here is an interesting result. It says that if you construct a random d-regular graph, then it is almost Ramanujan in this sense. Right, so it goes over this limit by at most a logarithmic factor on d. Okay, so this sort of gives hope that it's not coming up with Ramanujan graphs, which is the best that we can hope for as far as connectivity is concerned, may not be such a difficult thing to do, because even if you construct a graph at random, it seems to be not terribly worse than what an ideal Ramanujan graph should be. Okay, so that kind of sets the background for what I would call as expander graphs. Okay, as an expander graph family is it's a family of graphs of increasing size. Okay, and so this is the key thing. I want the expansion ratio to be at least some epsilon. Okay, so you give me a family of graphs, and for any of these graphs, whichever subset I pick, I would have at least epsilon into the size of that subset, that many edges going out of that subset. Okay, so any family of graphs which satisfies this property is what is called an expander graph, right? But it's not obvious that I mean you can have an expander graph, but it may not be the best possible in the sense that the spectral the second largest eigenvalue may not exactly be 2 root d minus 1, which is the ideal thing that we want. Okay. So you see, if you just want an expander graph family, it's not that difficult. I'll just move to the So like if you take a simple cycle, which is a 2 regular graph, right? So every node has degree 2, and now here it is easy to see that if you take this half, it has exactly 2 edges which lead you to the other half, right? So as the number of nodes in the graph increases, the expansion ratio basically tends to 0, right? So you're not going to have expander families of degree 2, okay? But then expander families do exist for all integers greater than 2, and that's not a very difficult proof either. Okay, but what is not obvious is to build expander graphs which are Ramanujan graphs, in fact. Okay. Okay, so there's another slightly more complicated example of an expander graph. I'll skip this. I'll move on to Ramanujan graphs. So essentially the question that we are toying with now is, what about expander graphs that are Ramanujan, where the second largest eigenvalue is in fact 2 root d minus 1. Okay, and the conjecture is that for any integer d greater than 2, there do exist arbitrarily large d regular Ramanujan graphs. Okay, and the answer to this conjecture is not at all easy. The explicit construction of such graphs have used a wide range of deep mathematics. It's been they've used everything from representation theory of Lie groups to number theory, algebraic geometry, all of that. Okay, so this is an example of so this is possibly the first construction, explicit construction of a Ramanujan graph, of a family of Ramanujan graphs, but with a fixed degree. So what Margulis showed was that this graph is in fact Ramanujan. Okay, but the question of whether you can build such graphs for higher degrees was still open. Okay, and the biggest breakthrough was this particular result, and they were the ones who coined the name Ramanujan graphs. So the first explicit construction of a Ramanujan family for arbitrarily large degree was based on, so I'll just describe the construction, definitely not the proof. So it's based on the Cayley graph of a group. So you pick the subset which is closed under inversion, and this is how the Cayley graph is defined. This is this I'm sure all of you would be familiar with. And there's a classical result by Jacobi which says that if you're looking for integer solutions to an equation of this kind, a squared plus b squared where p is a prime, and you can show that there are exactly 8 into p plus 1 such solutions, and of these 8 into p plus 1 solutions, there are exactly p plus 1 solutions which have this property, where a is greater than 0 and b, c, d are even. Okay, and this is what has been used in the construction. So if you pick p and q to be 2 unequal primes, and u an integer, so that u squared equal to minus 1 mod q, and for constructing the Cayley graph, you basically take the group of all 2 by 2 non-singular matrices over fq. Q is one of those primes. Okay, and so to build the Cayley graph, you need the group, and then you need the subgroup which is closed under inversion, and this is the subgroup. Okay, and the Jacobi result that I stated earlier on essentially implies that there are the size of this subgroup is exactly p plus 1. Okay, and just 1 second. Yeah. So if you take any element x, the number of edges that are going out of that is the size of S, which is p plus 1. So essentially the Cayley graph that we are talking about here is of degree p plus 1. Okay, and so this Cayley graph is a p plus 1 regular graph, and they showed that this was Ramanujan for arbitrarily large Q. Okay, yeah, so the name Ramanujan was because in the proof that it is Ramanujan, it crucially depended on one of Ramanujan's, I mean it was termed as Ramanujan's conjecture, which was later proved, and it's popularly known as the Ramanujan-Peterson conjecture, and hence the name Ramanujan graphs. So the LPS construction was also later extended to graphs with degree d, where d minus 1 is a prime power. The original proof only had proofs for d minus 1 being a prime. It was also extended to d minus 1 being a prime power. Existence construction of Ramanujan families for degrees d greater than or equal to 3 and d minus 1 not a prime or a prime power is still a big open problem in this area. So that's
known for polyhedral graphs.
Yes. The question is almost similar.
Question, yes, it is similar, but I mean, I think very little is known. I mean, if you notice, most of these results talk about d regular graphs, first of all, right? So for an arbitrary polyhedron, the polyhedral graph is obviously not regular. Yeah, but even if you restrict it to regular polyhedra, then yeah, then you can probably use some of these. I'm not sure. I need to think about it.
The question is, will it have an exponential lower bound? See, the diameter conjecture, the Hirsch conjecture in the program essentially says that the diameter is linear in the number of the dimension minus the number of instruments.
Right.
So if you can get the bound away from exponential, that would be of interest.
Hirsch conjecture in that form, there was a counterexample, but it still doesn't resolve this exponentiality question. It's still open in that.
The counter example was for unbounded polyhedra. It was a strange one.
Oh, okay.
Still a very open problem.
Okay. And you're referring to this 87 dimension or something that somebody came up with, but it was unbounded. Yeah.
And also, like, see here, we're doing just the opposite, right? I mean, we are going ahead and explicitly constructing a graph for it to have a low diameter. But there, I mean, you're not constructing the graph. The graph is given. I mean, it's the polyhedron as a graph, and it is whatever it is. Yeah. So, right. So there, in general, I don't know. I mean, if you can say anything about the diameter. But here I am actually constructing the graph in a particular manner for it to have a low diameter.
Chortal's results are based on the diameter of the polyhedron. But they are not used to the spectral.
Yeah.
I have a different general question, maybe more for the pure mathematician. We want all these discrete structures can be viewed as structures characterized by the property that you have some structure function which takes 0 and 1 elements. The incident matrix without distances and is 0, 1. Now this seems to imply that these structures are one-dimensional entities in a multi-dimensional space. Now what I'm interested in is, and you have combinatorics based on one-dimensional or zero-dimensional entities in one-dimensional, in n-dimensional space. Now we can think of discrete structures which are lower dimensional manifolds in higher dimensional spaces.